All right, so we're going to do a little quick session on DevTools and kind of do an introduction to how we do DevTools, just for general HTML, CSS, JavaScript, as well as for Shadow DOM. I don't have slides or anything for this, so we'll just sort of stream of consciousness kind of go through, and point out some things that are really useful. I find a good understanding of the DevTools really helps you be a better programmer, like more than any other set of tools I think that you can learn. I think understanding the developer tools really helps you to build things, to understand how things work, and to understand, more importantly, why things aren't working. So you're not just like writing code and reloading and hoping it works. We can actually start to examine what went wrong. So we'll do DevTools in Chrome, and I can quickly point some stuff out at DevTools in Firefox as well. I don't have IE on this machine, not on a Mac, but it's similar, just not quite as good. So,
just stick with Chrome.
All right, well, we'll stick with Chrome.
And anybody who's watching this video using another browser, you need to switch to Chrome because I own Google stock.
Sometimes you do have to, you do have to open IE to debug. If there's an IE only bug, those ones are really fun. But you need to, open IE to use that. So, and there are sometimes like Safari specific bugs, for example, too. There are specific bugs in every browser. We just never see Chrome specific bugs because usually programmers use Chrome, so they usually fix them all in development. All right, so this is our Bootstrap page here. And I just have a couple components. The first piece is how do I open up the DevTools. That one's important. So, there are a few different ways to do this. You can use F12. I don't use F12 because the function keys aren't default on my MacBook. So, but you can use F12 if you're using a keyboard where that's easy to do. And that will just open up DevTools. You can also do Control Option J, or Control Shift on Windows. You can also just right click and say Inspect Element, and Inspect Element is going to bring you to the inspector in DevTools. You can also go to View Developer Tools. Again, this is Mac specific. I think there's a similar option on Windows. That'll close it if you've already opened it. So, that'll bring up the developer tools. That's this panel over here. Sometimes it might be on the bottom. That's fine. Put it wherever is like most comfortable, depending on what you're debugging. I can move it depending on the page I'm on, because some pages it's more helpful to have it on the side. If it's like a wider, or if it's a narrower view and I need more of the height of the document, or vice versa if I need it to be wider. Right over here, I should highlight my mouse, but right over here, we have this option to move it. So there are three options here. If I click, it will go back to the last selected option. It doesn't cycle through all three. If I want to go through that third option that I might not use as commonly, I can go to that. So the one where it has a little thicker border on the right means it's going to dock to right. I click that, it docks to right. Thicker border on the bottom means dock to bottom. If I click and hold, I go to that third option, which is actually to pop out into its own window. And that can be helpful if I need the entire window and I need this separated.
What was that third one we just did?
That one looks like, that one, well, it won't show the current one I'm on. That's to pop it out into a new window. So right here, it says undock in a separate window. That's when it looks like two different squares, or two different rectangles.
What if yours never looks like that? Click and hold it.
Click and hold, yes, sorry. Click and hold to see the other options.
So it's really helpful to undock to a separate window if you're using more than one monitor.
Yeah, that's a good point. If you have two monitors, it's very helpful to have it in a separate window. This is only going to be the DevTools for the tab that you're in. So, if you switch tabs, you have a separate DevTools, or you don't have one at all. So it depends whether you've opened it up or not. All right. So that's how you get to DevTools. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 tabs in DevTools. We have our Elements tab. That's our first one. I'm going to zoom in here. You can zoom in on DevTools just like you would normally zoom in with your browser, like Control+ or Command+ on Mac. We have the Elements tab. We have the network tab, sources, timeline, profiles, resources, audits, and console. All of them are very helpful. We'll go through them one at a time. So let's start with our elements tab. So I'm going to move this to the side for now so we can see this a little more easily. I have my very cool Hello World badge. I can navigate through my entire DOM structure here in my elements panel. Everything's going to be collapsed by default, so I can click these little triangles to uncollapse or collapse the elements. Otherwise, it just would be very hard to navigate my document. So I can actually navigate directly, and I know that I'm on that row. I can see the highlights over. It means I have patterns. You'll notice the ones with strike-throughs are not applied because they're overridden somewhere. And I can just scroll down and see all the way back to the beginning. The first ones that might be overridden, or if sometimes they're going to be have a strike-through if they're browser-specific rules that have been overridden by a generic rule and don't apply, or don't apply altogether and they'll grayed out like this MOZ box sizing because I'm not in a Mozilla browser. Usually the ones at top are like the immediate ones that are applied, so very frequently these aren't overridden. I can actually go in and override this myself as well. I could say background blue, and I would change that. You'll notice it says element style here. It's actually going to apply these in line in that individual element. So if I scroll back here, you'll see now in my HTML it says background color blue. Style equals background color blue. I didn't write that in my HTML document. That's from the DevTools. It's inserted that for me. So I'll take that out. I can just uncheck or check any style that I want, including those that I write myself, or those that were there before. If I want to change the padding here, I can just uncheck that and it will change. We also have this really nice position diagram here, or box model diagram, which will tell me exactly where my width and height is coming from. So I have, and these are the real computed values here. So I never wrote 500.909, but I'm guessing this is from like width 100%. So it just happens that it's that wide. And it will say the exact width and height here. And then I can go ahead and mouse over that outer one and I get the padding. We noticed the green earlier, but now when I highlight over this specifically, it will only show me the padding. So I can see that I have 15 padding on the right and left. I don't have any border, I don't have any margin, I don't have any position. And if I mouse out to the outside, I'll see all of them. If you're not comfortable with the box model in CSS, this is a great way to get comfortable with it and start to understand how it works. This is a complicated CSS topic, but the DevTools make it easy to understand with this nice diagram.
And when we do box sizing border box, what that does is it doesn't allow your element to expand when you have box size and border box set. Then when you add padding and border, the size of your element doesn't grow, right? Instead, it tries to add the border and padding inside, shrinking the content inwards. So that's box size and border box in the box model.
Yeah, the box model, it can be tricky to see. This diagram helps us see it. And also these colors apply to, or they correspond to the colors I see out here as well in my main document when I highlight over something. So you'll see the green refers to the 15 pixels of green padding on either side. And up here it will also give me the width. The width is, the height here is changing. That's just because I have my slideshow going in the background, so that's changing the height. So you can see that's live updated. It'll also tell me the element with the class name that I'm on here. So div.call mv9. That corresponds here. Now, so far I've been doing that all via this Elements panel. I can also click the looking glass here, or the magnifying glass, and that will, as it says, select an element in the page to inspect it. This is very useful if I'm looking at my page and I don't know what something is. And so I'm not clicking here, I'm just mousing over, and you'll notice I'm highlighting all these individual elements, and you'll notice I see their padding, I see their margin, I see their height and width, it tells me the element type. All of that's here. And I can click on one, so if I click on this heading, now it's going to pull that up in the element panel. And so now that corresponds, I can see that I have a margin here. Again, I see down in my box sizing diagram, I have 20 pixels on top, 10 pixels on the bottom. And that's how I can go back and forth between my page and between the DevTools elements panel. If I want to pull up the console, and I'll go to the console panel next, but I can pull up the console from here, and in fact from any of these panels, I think any of them, just by hitting escape. When I hit escape, and it's a little cramped because I'm zoomed in here, but if I actually make that smaller, you'll see that I have all three panels here. I have the elements panel where I have my document, I have the informational panel here with my CSS style and with my, my box sizing diagram, and then down here I have my JavaScript console. Just know that I can pull it up here. Now I'm going to actually switch into that console. You'll notice that if my screen's too small, all those tabs are just collapsed to this drop down here. So I can just click on the little double arrows and I get the drop down. I'm going to go to console now. You'll notice when I have escape open in console, this is grayed out because you can't have two consoles. So I just hit escape again and it goes away. Now I'm in my JavaScript console. This is a console where we can execute JavaScript in the context of our page just by typing it in. So if I typed in alert foo and I hit enter, I'm going to get an alert box. And then I'm going to get a return value for the alert, which is another fine. That's kind of not that useful, but it shows it to me there. I can do anything I can do in JavaScript here. So I can say 1 plus 1. I hit enter and I get the return of that expression is 2. I can even set variables, so I can say var x equals foo, and then I could say, let's see, x plus exclamation point as a string. It's going to concatenate a string here. Hit enter, foo, exclamation point. So I can even save variables, and they'll be saved in this section of the console. If I reload the page, those variables go away. If I realize after a while that I've written too much, oops, oh, I also get errors if I have an error. If I realize that I've written too much, I can say clear as a function call, so clear with 2 parentheses, hit enter, and it all clears. So that's really useful if you just want a clean slate. Is there a question? No. Okay, cool. Yeah, feel free to ask questions though. This is just going to say top frame. You just always want to be there unless you're dealing with iframes. Let me open this up a little bit. I can click funnel here to filter things that show up in the console, only to see errors or warnings. This is also where any JavaScript exceptions will be thrown and shown. So let's go into our style guide here, and if I create a script tag at the top, and I say var x equals, and I just have a single, let me zoom in here. You'll see very obviously what my problem is, that I haven't closed my quotation marks. So if I do that and I reload, I get an error right here. Uncaught syntax error, unexpected token, illegal. Illegal sounds really scary, but it just means that it's illegal syntax. So what I can do is I can click this index.html. So that's telling me where the error is thrown. Index.html, colon after file name usually means line number. So that means line 17. I can click that, and it's going to bring me to our next panel. So all these panels are sort of linked together. We're just going to close this alert. So it brought me to my page. It actually didn't really show me the script, probably because it's an illegal character. So it's like, what are you doing? You can't even do that. So I'm going to save that and reload. However, this is where all my my resources are. So this is in sources. I'm going to put this full screen now so we can see that. Oops. There we go. So, actually, let me not do that. Can you still see the screen? Okay, great. These are all my downloaded sources here in DevTools. So you'll notice I have a couple things going on. One, I have this thing called no domain. This is just a bunch of stuff that's coming in from my DevTools from my browser. I don't need to worry about that. Then I have these two CDN URLs. So one ajax.google APIs. At one point I downloaded jQuery via this Google API, I think in the demonstration of downloading, or I think it's just for the style guide. So
Yeah.
that's downloading that. Then I have CDN.js for this highlight script. I added this script in so that it would highlight our code in our examples. So both of those are just downloaded via CDN. You don't have to worry about those. This is the important one, localhost. That's the server that I'm running this on because I'm running it through IntelliJ. So it just spun up this server. Now I start to see these folders. These look familiar, right? Web components exercises. If I extended this, I would see /style guide. And then I have two subfolders here, components and vendor. Vendor you don't have to worry about. That's all the bootstrap code. Components, I have my two components. Index and web components.js, which was our polyfill. I can now navigate through these and click on them, and it will show the all the content on the side here.
So this is the original source versus what you see rendered by the browser.
Yes, this is the original source. And the HTML isn't as helpful here. You probably wouldn't look at the HTML. What you might see is a script, though. So let me put in a script here, and I'll call it source equals foo.js. And what I'll do in my style guide is I'll create a file called foo. And I'll say console.log hello world. Console.log is how we can log things to our console here. So if I go to my console, and somewhere here I have the DevTools. So I'm going to reload this page, exit full screen, reload. I'll go back into my, there we go. So now you notice it opens my console. I have hello world there because I console log that. I can actually click here again, even if it's not an error, and go to the place that this was called. So wherever it is in the console, where it is called from, it's going to link to that in sources. I'm in my sources panel. So now this is a little more interesting because now I have my JavaScript here. And this is how we debug our JavaScript if we want to do step-by-step debugging. And this is very important. Step-by-step debugging is something that we can do in a lot of programming languages and something that we can also do in JavaScript. So let me write a for loop here. For var I equals 0, I is less than, well, I'll make an array. And I'll put some letters in here. All right, I is less than or dot length, I plus plus. And then I'll console.log, I'll say r sub I. And let's pretend I had done this here, less than the equals to r dot length. I mean, we know better, right? But like, what if I'd accidentally done less than equals, less than or equals? So I will reload this, go to my console. And we'll see, we have my hello world from before, then we have A, B, C, and undefined. And why do we have undefined? Well, maybe we don't know why we have undefined. Why was that undefined? So what I can do here is I can put a debugger. Actually, I'll do that in my actual sources. So I'll put a debugger statement. This is just a statement. You don't want to leave this in your code for production, but you can put it here for development. You put a debugger. And if we, let's see, I can reload this while the debugger's open, and it'll reload. When I reload it, you'll notice it's like still loading. That's not because something that's taking a long time to load. That's because I put that debugger statement in there. So let me move this back here. You'll actually see it says paused in debugger. Nothing's here on the page. Nothing's on the page because it's stopped at that script tag where I put that line debugger. And then you'll notice here in my sources panel, it highlights this line, and that's where it says debugger. This means I'm stopped in the middle of this loop. So I'm stopped the first time we hit this loop. I can hit escape and bring up my console here. So I also have access to my console. But now my console is in the context of the debugger. Yes?
Can you set, because your debugger's basically setting a breakpoint, right?
Yes,
Can
exactly.
you set breakpoints clicking the margin?
Yes. I'll get to that in 1 second. So the key with us being in a breakpoint here is now I'm in the context of where this statement was. So if I type in I don't have to do anything else. I'm actually going to get the value of I here. I is 0. And if I continue with my debugger, I'll just hit resume. That's this play button over here. I can hit resume. It's going to run through again. And it just kind of blinked there. You might not have noticed. But you do notice that A is outputted here in my console. And now if I type I, you'll notice I is 1. Because I've gone through the loop again. And I can keep going. And then until I get here where I is 3. And of course, this is where my issue is, because if I kept going, I would get that exception. I can know that because I go R sub I is undefined. The reason R sub I is undefined is because my arrays are 0 indexed, so R sub 3 is not a thing. So it's 0, 1, 2, 3 is not a thing. So that's how we can see it. And Todd brought up the very good point that I can also do this in the margins here. So let me demonstrate that. I'll take out debugger. If you're looking at the source panel here, I can do the same thing just by clicking on a number. When I click on a number, I get this little thing called a breakpoint. And that's going to pause there when I reload. And you know, the same thing, it's still loading. Sometimes you have to move this for it to re-render. It's going to be all great. It's going to say pause in debugger. And I have the same exact thing where I am paused in my loop. I can make more than one breakpoint. I can also make conditional breakpoints. And conditional breakpoints are very useful if I don't want to have to keep hitting play to keep going through that loop. I know that there's a certain condition that I'm interested in. So if I want to do a conditional breakpoint, I might do something like this. Add conditional breakpoint.
Can you right-click there on the margin to get that?
Yes. Yes, good point. I can't show the clicks on here. So I right-click and I say add conditional breakpoint. I could just add breakpoint. That would do normal things. But conditional breakpoint will only stop if this expression is true. And so what I'm interested in is if R sub I is undefined. So I can just say, well actually, that won't work, so I'll say type of R sub I equals undefined. And now if I reload, it's going to stop. Again, you have to resize it a little bit to get the pause and debugger. You'll notice the breakpoint is a different color when it's conditional. And unlike before, when I click I, now I starts at 3. It's not starting at 0, and I have to keep clicking, and if I click next, I'm gonna end. So that's a nice way to get exactly to the point where you're unsure of something, and you want to see what's going on.
That's sweet.
Yeah, conditionals are helpful. I can also set a breakpoint where the actual exception is thrown. So instead of going in and doing the manual breakpoints, I can say, bring this up here. Let me zoom out. See why that's not. Okay, let's do it like this for now. Having trouble with the resizing, but what I can do is I can do this this handy button here, pause on exceptions. This one's very useful. So it's this little pause button. And that means instead of just throwing the exception in the console and letting me go and like track down where I think it is, I can just say pause on exceptions. So now when I reload, oops, let's see. Oh, well I didn't have an exception thrown, so let me throw an actual exception. That was just undefined, it wasn't an error. But if I say undefined dot length, right, so this is going to work normally, it's just going to give you the length of the string, which in these cases is all 1. But if it's undefined, undefined.length isn't a thing, so it's going to throw an exception. So I'll reload, and now I get a, now I get a pause exception. There we go. It says pause and debugger. I didn't actually put a breakpoint though. I have no debugger statement, I have no breakpoint. And I don't actually even have an exception thrown here. It means when it threw the exception, before it like outputted it to me, it paused. And so that was really useful, because now I can figure out what's going on here. And if I didn't know where in the code that was happening, this might be helpful. I can also get things like, I'll go back to docking this on the bottom. Actually, I'll undock it. It's a little tricky with the zoom here. Okay. I can also get things like the call stack, and in this case the call stack was only one function, but it might not have been. I might have gone through multiple function layers to get here, and the exception might have been thrown at another point, but I actually missed it. So let's try here. I want to say, we'll go log val, or log val, right? This is not a thing, I'm going to make it a thing. Let's say for log val equals function, and then here, I'll just put console log console log, we'll call it num.length, we'll pass in number, and I'll pass in that as I. No, RI. Instead of calling this number, I'll call this letter. Cool. So now, if I have pause on exceptions selected, which I do, when I reload this, it's going to pause on the exceptions here. And you'll notice in the call stack here, I now have two things. So in the call stack, I have log val, and I have anonymous function. And so this might be helpful depending on how you're debugging it. You might have wanted to know, this was where the actual exception got called, but what was before that? What actually called that function in the first place? And so I can just navigate through here. And this will navigate through multiple files as well.
In the call stack, the fender is at the top.
Yes, exactly. That's where the actual exception was thrown. But the actual offending code might be in a different place. So like how you define offending code might be different depending on the error. So maybe, the exception was thrown right at the top here, but it was actually a bad value that was passed in. In this case, it was a bad value that was passed in. It was undefined. So, I might have wanted to know that this was undefined. Why? Well, it was undefined in this for loop. And then I could, figure out why.
All right, so JavaScript newbie question.
Yeah.
It says over there under your call stack, foo.js:7, line 7 is an anonymous function.
Yep.
But on line 7, it's log val. That doesn't look anonymous to me.
So it's just this entire script tag, and it's just calling that an anonymous function. I believe. The log val should be here for line 4, where it's actually in the function. But here it's saying, well, this isn't in a function,
Okay.
which it's not. I mean, yeah, it might be, it is a little inaccurate to call it an anonymous function, I guess, because it's really in the global scope. Maybe that's just what it's referring to. It will tell me here what the scope is. So you'll see down here, scope global. It means I'm on the window. That's when I'm in the anonymous function here, or, not actually anonymous, it's the for loop, no function at all. But when I'm in log val on line 4, now it's going to say local and global. All right, so the first scope is local, and as I go up that context tree, or context chain rather, I'll end up on global. And this will be have multiple lines here depending on what your scope chain looks like. But in local, I can see, and this is useful as well. Within scope, you can actually see the variables defined in that scope. And so here I have letter is defined in my local scope. I can see that. And so I can actually click and see the value, or I don't even need to click. It says it right there, what the value is. In this case, it's undefined. If I demonstrate this without pause on exceptions, so without pause on exceptions, just hit play here too, just to play. So I didn't pause on exceptions. The sources will actually show me again where the exception was, even if I didn't pause. Shows me a little red underline. If I just put a normal old breakpoint in there, let's rerun. Okay, it stopped on the normal breakpoint. You'll notice that letter here is A. So I don't even need to type the letter in the console. I could if I wanted, but I can see exactly here that it's a string A. And it tells me what that is. And if I click, next, it's going to run it again, going to go through the loop again, and now the letter will be B. So this is not very useful in the basic example, but you can step over or step into these functions even more if you want to drill down into what's happening. I'm not going to go into detail on that right now. I'm going to move to the other panels.
Well, I'm really enjoying this. I don't feel like this is something we got to rush through before
Okay.
lunch.
Yeah,
And,
then,
and when there's questions for people, I think this is super, super, super valuable. Sorry, just having a little fun. for web programming, like knowing how to use developer tools in Chrome. So I think this is super valuable. And that step into, step over, breakpoints, that's something that took me a while to get my head around, and I still feel like I don't totally have it. So I think that would warrant just another minute or two, please.
Okay.
Or
cool.
do you want to drop it and pick it up after lunch?
Yeah, it's probably a good
We're
break
at
point.
31 minutes on the recording?
Yeah, this is a good break point.
Yeah.
We can break for lunch, and we'll pick
Yeah,
up
how
after
about that?
lunch.
Sounds good. And I can get an example together before that.